To Mrs. Jane Clemens and Mrs. Moffett in St. Louis, Carson City, February 8, 1862. My dear mother and sister, by George, Cornelia, I begin to fear that I have invoked a spirit of some kind or other, which I will find some difficulty in laying. I wasn't much terrified by your growing inclinations, but when you began to call presentiments to your aid, I confess that I weaken. Mr. Moffett is right, as I said before, and I am not much afraid of his going wrong. Men are easily dealt with, but when you get the women started, you are in for it, you know. But I have decided on two things, viz. Any of you or all of you may live in California, for that is the Garden of Eden reproduced. But you shall never live in Nevada. And secondly, none of you, save Mr. Moffett, shall ever cross the plains. If you were only going to Pike's Peak, a little matter of 700 miles from St. Joe, you might take the coach, and I wouldn't say a word. But I consider it over 2,000 miles from St. Joe to Carson, and the first 600 or 800 miles is mere 4th of July compared to the balance of the route. But Lord bless you, a man enjoys every foot of it. If you ever come here or to California, it must be by sea. Mr. Moffett must come by overland coach, though, by all means. He would consider it the jolliest little trip he ever took in his life. Either June, July, or August are the proper months to make the journey in. He could not suffer from heat, and 3 or 4 heavy army blankets would make the cold nights comfortable. If the coach were full of passengers, 2 good blankets would probably be sufficient. If he comes and brings plenty of money and fails to invest it to his entire satisfaction, I will prophesy no more. But I will tell you a few things which you wouldn't have found out if I hadn't got myself into this scrape. I expect to return to St. Louis in July per steamer. I don't say that I will return then or that I shall be able to do it, but I expect to, you bet. I came down here from Humboldt in order to look after our Esmeralda interests, and my sore-backed horse and the bad roads have prevented me from making the journey. Yesterday, one of my old Esmeralda friends, Bob Howland, arrived here, and I have had a talk with him. He owns with me in the Horatio and Derby ledge. He says our tunnel is in 52 feet, and a small stream of water has been struck, which bids fair to become a big thing by the time the ledge is reached, sufficient to supply a mill. Now, if you knew anything of the value of water here, you would perceive at a glance that if the water should amount to 50 or 100 inches, we wouldn't care whether school kept or not. If the ledge should prove to be worthless, we'd sell the water for money enough to give us quite a lift. But you see, the ledge will not prove to be worthless. We have located nearby a fine site for a mill, and when we strike the ledge, you know, we'll have a mill site, water power, and pay rock all handy. Then we shan't care whether we have capital or not. Mill folks will build us a mill and wait for their pay. If nothing goes wrong, we'll strike the ledge in June, and if we do, I'll be home in July, you know. Amelia, don't you know that undemonstrated human calculations won't do to bet on? Don't you know that I have only talked as yet, but proved nothing? Don't you know that I have expended money in this country, but have made none myself? Don't you know that I have never held in my hands a gold or silver bar that belonged to me? Don't you know that it's all talk and no cider so far? Don't you know that people who always feel jolly no matter where they are or what happens to them, who have the organ of hope preposterously developed, who are endowed with an uncongealable sanguine temperament, who never feel concerned about the price of corn, and who cannot by any possibility discover any but the bright side of a picture, are very apt to go to extremes and exaggerate with 40-horse microscopic power? Of course, I never tried to raise these suspicions in your mind, but then your knowledge of the fact that some people's poor, frail human nature is a sort of crazy institution anyhow ought to have suggested them to you. Now, if I hadn't thoughtlessly got you into the notion of coming out here and thereby got myself into a scrape, I wouldn't have given you that highly colored paragraph about the mill, etc., because, you know, if that pretty little picture should fail and wash out and go to the devil generally, it wouldn't cost me the loss of an hour's sleep. But you fellows would be so much distressed on my account as I could possibly be if circumstances beyond my control were to prevent my being present at my own funeral. But in the bright lexicon of youth there's no such word as fail, and I'll prove it. And look here, I came near forgetting it. Don't you say a word to me about trains across the plains, because I'm down on that arrangement. That sort of thing is played out, you know. The overland coach or the mail steamer is the thing. You want to know something about the route between California and Nevada Territory? Suppose you take my word for it that it is exceedingly jolly. Or take for a winter view J. Ross Brown's picture in Harper's Monthly of pack mules tumbling 1,500 feet down the side of a mountain. Why, bless you, there's scenery on that route. You can stand on some of those noble peaks and see Jerusalem and the Holy Land. And you can start a boulder and send it tearing up the earth and crashing over trees down, down, down to the very devil, madam. And you would probably stand up there and look and stare and wonder at the magnificence spread out before you till you starve to death, if let alone. But you should take someone along to keep you moving. Since you want to know, I will inform you that an 8-stamp watermill put up and ready for business would cost about $10,000 to $12,000. Then the water to run it with would cost from $1,000 to $30,000, and even more according to the location. What I mean by that is that water powers in this vicinity are immensely valuable. So also in Esmeralda. But Humboldt is a new country, and things don't cost so much there yet. I saw a good water power sold there for $750. But here is the way the thing is managed. A man with a good water power on Carson River will lean his axe up against a tree, provided you find him chopping cordwood at $4 a day, and taking his chalk pipe out of his mouth to afford him an opportunity to answer your questions, will look you coolly in the face and tell you his little property is worth $40,000 or $50,000. But you can easily fix him. You tell him that you'll build a quartz mill on his property and make him a fourth or a third or half owner in said mill in consideration of the privilege of using said property, and that will bring him to his milk in a jiffy. So he spits on his hands and goes in again with his axe until the mill is finished, when lo, out pops the quondam wood chopper, arrayed in purple and fine linen, and prepared to deal in bank stock, or bet on the races, or take government loans, with an air, as to the amount of the most don't-care-a-damnedest unconcern that you can conceive of. By George, if I just had $1,000, I'd be all right. Now, there's the Horatio, for instance. There are 5 or 6 shareholders in it, and I know I could buy half of their interest at, say, $20 per foot. Now, the flour's worth $50 per barrel, and they are pressed for money. But I am hard up myself and can't buy. And in June they'll strike the ledge, and then goodbye canary. I can't get it for love of money. $20 a foot. Think of it. For ground that is proven to be rich. $20, madam, and we wouldn't part with a foot of our 75 for 5 times the sum. So it will be in Humboldt next summer. The boys will get pushed and sell ground for a song that is worth a fortune. But I am at the helm now. I have convinced Orion that he hasn't business talent enough to carry on a peanut stand, and he has solemnly promised me that he will meddle no more with mining or other matters not connected with the secretary's office. So, you see, if mines are to be bought or sold, or tunnels run, or shafts sunk, parties have to come to me, and me only. I'm the firm, you know. How long does it take one of those infernal trains to go through? Well, anywhere between 3 and 5 months. Tell Margaret that if you ever come to live in California, that you can promise her a home for 100 years, and a bully one. But she wouldn't like the country. Some people are malicious enough to think that if the devil were set at liberty and told to confine himself to Nevada territory, that he would come here and look sadly around a while and then get homesick and go back to hell again. But I hardly believe it, you know. I am saying, mind you, that Margaret wouldn't like the country, perhaps, nor the devil either, for that matter, or any other man, but I like it. When it rains here, it never lets up till it has done all the raining it has got to do, and after that there's a dry spell, you bet. Why, I have had my whiskers and mustaches so full of alkali dust that you'd have thought I worked in a starch factory and boarded in a flour barrel.